Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that every credit card in America has stopped working. No taps, no swipes, no online checkouts. Just silence. Within hours, grocery lines collapse, gas stations shut down, and Amazon becomes a museum. Most Americans don't realize this, but the entire modern economy runs on invisible streams of borrowed money, and credit cards are the gateway drug. But how did a nation built on thrift, savings, and cash-only transactions transform into a society comfortable swiping its way into trillions of dollars of debt? How did credit cards go from experimental plastic rectangles in the 1950s to the financial oxygen of everyday life? And perhaps the biggest question of all, did credit cards empower Americans or quietly trap them? Today on Financial History TV, we're diving deep into the credit card revolution, the billion-dollar industry behind it, and how America learned to spend money it didn't actually have. Let's rewind to where it all began.
To understand the revolution, you have to picture America before credit cards existed. The year is 1949. No one carries plastic. No one buys groceries on installment loans. If you didn't have the cash, you didn't buy it. Stores offered layaway. Pay now, receive later. Department stores issued store credit accounts, but only for loyal customers they personally knew. Banks were deeply conservative. Lending to average households was considered risky and even irresponsible. America, for most of its history, ran on a simple idea. Debt was dangerous, cash was king. But after World War II, something started to shift. The economy was booming, suburban neighborhoods exploded, a new middle class emerged with stable wages, rising confidence, and a taste for modern convenience. Still, there was one thing missing: a universal purchasing tool that could travel anywhere the consumer went. And then, one man's embarrassing dinner created a financial revolution.
In 1949, businessman Frank McNamara went to dinner in New York City. When the bill arrived, he reached into his pocket and realized he had forgotten his wallet. Legend says he had to call his wife to bring cash. McNamara, mortified, promised himself that this would never happen again, not to him, not to any businessman. A year later, he returned to the same restaurant, but this time he paid with a cardboard card, the world's first Diners Club card. The idea was radical. A single card you could use at multiple restaurants, then pay later in full every month. No interest, no revolving debt, just convenience. It wasn't a credit card yet, more like a charge card, but the seed was planted. Within a year, 20,000 New Yorkers were using it. Within a decade, the concept exploded. But the real revolution began when banks wanted in.
Fast forward to 1958. Bank of America was looking for ways to grow in suburban California. They had a crazy idea. What if the bank gave tens of thousands of people access to credit without them ever applying? So they did something unthinkable. They mailed 60,000 credit cards, real, active, usable credit cards, to random people in Fresno, California. No background checks, no income verification, no consent. This was the birth of Bank AmeriCard, the ancestor of today's Visa. The reaction? Chaos. People who never asked for credit suddenly had it. Some treated it like free money. Fraud skyrocketed. Delinquencies shot through the roof. Merchants were confused, customers were confused, and the system nearly collapsed. But despite the disaster, something magical happened. People loved it. They loved the freedom. They loved the flexibility. And banks realized something powerful. If you let consumers borrow money, most of them will, and many will keep borrowing. That was the moment banks understood credit cards were not just a service, they were a gold mine.
The early cards, like Diners Club, required full monthly repayment. But banks had a different vision. They wanted people to carry balances and pay interest. This was revolving credit, the true engine of the credit card industry. With revolving credit, Americans could buy now, pay later, pay the minimum, and stretch payments for months or years. It turned consumer spending into a perpetual money machine for banks. By the mid-1960s, millions of Americans were carrying credit cards. But there was still one major problem. A Bank AmeriCard from California couldn't be used in New York. A Texas Bank card couldn't be used in Florida. The system was fragmented. Merchants were overwhelmed. Banks were confused. And then came the moment that changed everything.
In 1966, a group of banks formed the Interbank Card Association, which later became MasterCard. Their mission? Create a unified network where all banks could participate. Bank AmeriCard followed suit in 1970, spinning off into an independent association that eventually became Visa. This is when credit cards stopped being bank products and became global financial networks like highways that money traveled on. Each swipe now connected consumers, merchants, banks, processors, and a growing web of intermediaries. And all of them made money from fees, interest, or both. The more people swiped, the more everyone profited. By the 1970s, the revolution was unstoppable. One little-known moment in history transformed credit cards from useful tools into engines of mass borrowing. It happened in 1978, Marquette National Bank versus First of Omaha Service Corp. The Supreme Court ruled that banks could charge interest based on the laws of the state where the bank was headquartered, not where the customer lived. This meant if a bank moved to a state with no interest caps, they could charge any rate they wanted. So banks started moving to places like South Dakota and Delaware, which eliminated usury laws to attract business. Overnight, credit card interest rates shot up. Some hit 25%, 30%, even 35%. And Americans still swiped. Because by now, credit cards weren't just optional, they were becoming essential. In the 1980s and 1990s, credit cards blended into daily life. They symbolized freedom, opportunity, status. Commercials sold dreams. Don't leave home without it. Cards became colorful, personalized, even luxurious. Airline miles, cashback, hotel points, rewards weren't just perks, they were behavioral engineering. Americans began chasing points, not realizing the math was working against them. And meanwhile, companies used data to predict your spending, your habits, even your risk of default. The card in your wallet wasn't just a payment tool. It was a behavior tracking device, a profit engine, a lifestyle influencer. By 2000, credit cards were so common that Americans carried more plastic than cash. And debt? It soared.
Let's be honest. Credit cards can be empowering, but they can also be dangerous. Here's why. Minimum payments are psychological traps. Paying the minimum can stretch a $2,000 purchase into 15 years of debt. Interest compounds invisibly. Consumers don't see the meter running, so the pain is delayed. Credit scoring punishes the borrower. Late once, pay for it for years. Fees, penalties, and special rates quietly pile up. Aggressive marketing targets young, inexperienced consumers. By the 2000s, the banks were approving cards for college students who had no income because data showed they would likely carry balances for years. After the 2008 financial crisis, Americans briefly pulled back. But by the 2010s and 2020s, the swipe culture came roaring back with a vengeance. Buy now, pay later. Tap to pay. Online impulse shopping. Subscription everything. Each innovation made spending easier and debt easier to fall into. Today, U.S. credit card debt has surpassed $1 trillion, the highest in history.
The short answer is yes, completely. Credit cards changed. 1. Consumer behavior. People buy more often, with less friction. Impulse buying skyrocketed. Budgets became blurry. 2. Business models. Entire industries, from airlines to hotels to e-commerce, depend on credit card networks. 3. Financial identity. Your credit score affects your job applications, insurance rates, rental opportunities. A single number defines your financial life. 4. The money supply. Every time you swipe, banks create new short-term credit. Credit cards effectively expand the money supply without printing a single dollar. 5. America's economy. The U.S. economy is now fueled by consumer spending, much of it on borrowed money. Credit cards didn't just change how Americans pay, they changed how America works.
So where does that leave us? Credit cards are neither heroes nor villains. They are tools, powerful tools that can build credit, offer convenience, and unlock opportunities. But they can also quietly dominate your finances if you don't understand how they work. The real lesson from this revolution is this. When you swipe a card, you're not just spending money. You're making a deal with the future version of yourself. Sometimes that future version benefits. Sometimes it suffers. Credit cards gave America unprecedented freedom, but that freedom came with responsibility. And as debt continues rising, the question becomes, are we using credit cards, or are credit cards using us? The story of America's spending revolution is still being written, and your choices, your swipes, your payments, your discipline will shape the next chapter.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden history behind America's spending habits, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode from Financial History TV. And drop a comment below. Have credit cards helped you or burned you? Your stories help shape our next videos. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned because the history of money is the history of power.